On Monday, President Obama said reports that the IRS targeted the groups were outrageous and that there was no place for it in his administration. But he said he'd wait for the official IG report. The Attorney General, I don't know what IG is. That wouldn't be Attorney General, but anyway, my guest probably will tell me. Anyway, he's waiting for the report to be released before demanding any action to be taken by the Treasury Department. Well, if it leads to him, there'll be more action than that being taken. And who would have encouraged some IRS employees to go ahead and do this? Who would have encouraged that? Well, it could have been somebody who was, an ultra-Democrat or, maybe a libertarian, I don't know, decided, well, we're going to make things difficult. And this is one way to do it. The biggest, we watch every movie, whenever they say the government's after you, they'll come after you with the IRS. People would rather not hear that. Let's go. My guest is an expert accountant, an IRS mediation professional, and a lawyer. Marty Davidoff is with us. Hi, Marty.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. So, what does this smell like to you? Like, as you might have just heard my remarks, who would give somebody a nudge, nudge, wink, wink in the IRS and say, get on these guys? It seems to me like something's going on.
It wouldn't happen. But first of all, the IG report, which is actually TIGTA, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration.
Okay.
All right? That report came out yesterday. And that report basically points to incompetence in managing the process. And in looking at some of the postings, talking to people in the know, essentially what happened here is there are over 60,000 exempt applications a year coming into the IRS, and those have been going up a few thousand a year, partly because there are these political-like animals that are saying, we're educational organizations, so approve us as an exemption, but they smell a lot like political organizations, and a political organization is not entitled to an exemption. So, and by the way, at this point, what ended up happening, about 300 of these applications got questionnaires. Of these 300, about 100 were for these conservative groups based upon the names Tea Party and Patriot and 912.
Oh.
So those are some of the facts. And what happens is you have an organization of 100,000 people, the IRS, which every year is not getting more people, but is getting more responsibility. They're asked, do more with less, process more applications, process rebates, process Obama's health care reforms, process all of these things. And you have, generally, in the IRS, hard-working people. The problem here with the IRS is, as soon as they found out they were not candid with the American public, as soon as the leadership learned that this small group in Cincinnati that processes these items, that looks at this, as soon as they realized at the higher level, which is in 11, maybe even 12, they should have, when they were questioned by Congress, say, look, we've looked into this. This was happening. We've asked the Treasury Inspector General to do a complete report, and they will do so, but this is certainly not anything that we indicated to them. And having 30 years experience working with IRS leadership, these are people who are well-intentioned. Never in a million years would anybody in the leadership of the IRS say, target these groups. What happened here, there were a lot of groups that sounded and smelled political. A small group of people say, listen, as we're triaging these thousands of applications, let's pick out the ones that obviously have some political tilt. 90, as I said, about 100 of 300 were 100 of the 300 picks for additional questions were these conservative groups, and so you can call for some mismanagement, some poor judgments at the bottom level, but there was no intent here to targeting, and there was no, nobody saying we're going to target conservative groups for this. The impact was that happened to a small extent, and just for the record, none of these groups were denied an exemption at this time. Some of them, there's been no answer yet, but none of them have been denied an exemption.
So what I'm hearing from you, I mean, thank you, Marty. But what I'm hearing now is that maybe some groups are trying to make hay while the sun shines with this, and it doesn't. It can be the media itself too. I mean, we can be responsible for that too. But I was under the impression that this sort of thing doesn't happen very often. But when you're explaining it that way, you got the same problems that we have in Canada. People in this austerity movement making more, as you're saying, they're having to process more and more and do more and more with less people. But I think something like this, I think they tend, both in Canada with Canada Revenue Agency and with the IRS, I think people tend to think that they have to be as upfront as possible because they demand that of us.
And that's right. And one of the things here, I hope that this does bring out the following, and this is what I hope that it brings out. The IRS is a very powerful organization, and the IRS does from time to time make poor decisions and does mismanagement. And unfortunately, the general press doesn't pay any attention to them. 7 years ago, the IRS started saying, you know what, we're going to prohibit contingent fees. So if I have a little old lady walk into my office, and this little old lady says, you know, Mr. Davidoff, can you look at my last year's return? And I say, you know, I can amend that return, save you $2,000. It's going to cost you $500 for me to amend that return. And this little old lady says, well, Marty, but what if they don't approve it? Will you refund the money? And if I say yes, it's a contingent fee, and I've just broken the regulation of the IRS, and I might be brought before the director of taxes for doing a contingent fee when I'm not authorized to. So what they've done and some of the things they've done in other areas that are not being right now magnified, I would hope that some of these other things that the IRS does that are really inappropriate, that reflect poor decisions by them, can get a better look at the mainstream media. Now that they're looking at the IRS, maybe some of these other issues can come out.
Okay. Now, and Marty, you've had a relationship in one way or another with the IRS for 30 years. So just to be clear, there's no way that, like, this doesn't look or smell to you like, again, you really did cover this, but I just want to make sure, doesn't smell to you like there's been some kind of, hanky-panky here. This is just bad accounting?
No, it's bad management, some bad decisions. And the biggest part of this is the lack of forthright with Congress. When Congress asked the question and the IRS said, no, this is not happening, that, in my mind, was unacceptable and should not have happened, and somebody should pay for not being forthright with Congress.
Okay. Well, Marty, thank you so much. I'd love you to come back and speak to us again sometime.
Anytime, Jeff.
It's been fantastic. Marty, you've cleared the air for us. Marty Davidoff.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for your time.